Blizzard finally killed Roadhog and the meta has shifted. After much desire from the community, we finally got an update where Blizzard dealt with their most problematic tank, Roadhog. That's pretty much all they did though, and we are still in an interesting meta. With that said, let's get into ranking the best and worst heroes, starting with supports at the D tier. Wait. It's not the power of the character that matters, but the power of the player, and there is no better way to improve your game than by checking out GameLeap.com. We have hundreds of guides all finely crafted from some of the best coaches in the game, with multiple new ones coming every single week that are designed to help you lock in and start climbing. Just follow the link in the description below or go to GameLeap.com to get your subscription today. Okay, first up, getting right into it, we have the reigning worst support hero in the game, Brigitte. She still hasn't received any meaningful change in the past many patches that she has been stuck down here, and while there are heroes like Kiriko in the game, the one-dimensional Brigitte is not going anywhere. Moving on up into our C tier, we have Moira, and I'm going to get a lot of contention on this one, but remember that just because you can get value on a hero doesn't mean that they are at the top on paper. Moira is also pretty one-dimensional, but is slightly better than Brig due to her higher heal rate and higher pick potential with her damage orb and right click. Ultimately, there are supports with far superior utility though. Moving on up into the B tier, we have Zenyatta, and I am seeing a slow but certain Zen resurgence, which is not too surprising given the slower pace and more tank-oriented nature of the game. Discord provides a lot of damage boost to not just 1 but 5 players, and his ranged heals allow for him to pocket DPSs while going for one-shots with his volley. Getting into the real strong supports in the A tier, we start things off with Ana. Ana's utility is slowly becoming more and more of a threat. She still has one of the only true CCs in the game and is one of the longest as well. The buffs to her damage and heal rate were also surprisingly effective, and of course her ultimate is still one of the strongest combo ults in the entire game. Next up on our A tier is going to be Baptiste, and I am seeing more and more Bap getting played as of late, and it's in part thanks to his insane damage output. Bap can practically serve as an additional DPS while putting out all the healing pressure of a main healer, and since he is hit scan, his damage is some of the most consistent. His immortality field is also fantastic right now, and he's got a great ultimate to boot. Our final A tier support is going to be Lucio, and speed boost is extremely solid, and in a lot of metas it's even necessary. On the control maps, you can even argue that Lucio is an S tier pick. However, I still think that the two S tier supports we have are superior picks in general right now, which leaves Lucio at the edge of S and A tier. Moving into our S tier, we have our first mainstay support, Kiriko. Kiriko is essentially a must pick in the meta right now. Suzu is strong, her damage is strong, her healing is strong, her ultimate is strong, and her self-reliability is strong. There's really nothing that Kiriko is bad at right now, which leaves her solidly planted at the S tier. Our final S tier support is going to be the dreaded Mercy. Overwatch Twitter either absolutely hates her or absolutely loves her. She is a very polarizing hero with lots of important utility in the current meta, namely her damage boost. Sojourn is still extremely powerful, and with one-shots being so prominent, Rez comes in clutch very often. She's a great S tier pick with the pacing of the current meta. Okay, moving on into the very lengthy DPS role, we're going to kick things off and go a little bit quicker, starting at the D tier of course with Sombra. She's by far and away the worst DPS in the game right now. Her win rate is down to 39% in ranked, and there's no talks of her getting any tuning anytime soon. Moving into our C tier, we have Reaper. There may be some disagreements with me on this, but pretty much all of the meta tanks have an insane amount of close range damage and also the ability to mitigate a ton of Reaper's damage. Since he has to get in close, he puts himself in danger waiting these cooldowns out from the enemy tanks and doesn't really seem to be a better pick than the other DPSs who can do the same amount of damage but also poke. Moving on up into the B tier, we start to have a larger group of the DPS cast, and we start with Genji. Genji is a solid diving hero and can be a great surprise pick with the current one-shot and slow-paced meta of the game. He isn't going to be able to stop a tank from walking on his team, but he can grab quick picks in the enemy backline and be a helpful win condition or a source of pressure. Next in the B tier, we have Soldier. Soldier simply does not have enough burst to be anything but just decent in this meta. He can get a ton of value, but he is simply outshined by other options higher up in the food chain. Next on our B tier is Mei, and Mei is certainly a surprising pick on a lot of maps. Her right click is a great source of poke, and her wall can make tanks feel less invincible, which honestly is a great change of pace. Mei's primary fire also does a surprising amount of damage, and she still has a fantastic ultimate. Next up we have Symmetra, and Sim was seeing a steady grow in power level, but I think she's kind of tapered off in the B tier somewhat harshly. There are many maps where Sim can get a ton of value and shine as as a carry, but these are her best case scenarios, and most of the time she's just going to get outpoked in one shot. Our final B tier DPS is going to be Cassidy, and a really good Cassidy can make him feel like a higher tier pick, but he simply has to be too close with his damage fall off in the current meta. Unless you're on defense, there's not an easy way to close distance, and finding those perfect fighting scenarios for him, especially against snipers who can sit across the map and just one shot you, is very difficult. Moving on up into our A tier, we have one of those aforementioned snipers, Hanzo. Hanzo is a good blend of being able to one shot and deal steady damage. His sonic arrow is a really helpful utility for the sniper and one shot meta that we're in right now, and his wall climb allows for him to shoot above shields or obstacles. Next up in our A tier, we have Ashe, and Ashe is a really solid hero simply due to her ultimate being so powerful. Bob is a super clutch ultimate that can win team fights all on its own, and Ashe herself has plenty of damage to support him. Dynamite is a great way of flushing enemies off of corners, and her headshots do enough damage to be substantial. Next up on the A tier, we have my personal favorite DPS right now, Bastion. Bastion deals way more pressure than people give him credit for right now. He is far more sniper resistant than most other heroes in the game due to his large health pool and his armor. Also, when he transforms, his crit hitbox conveniently goes on his back, allowing for him to push to avoid being insta-killed, and he takes less damage. And his damage is absolutely immense, and his ultimate is a free Ana pick every single time. Next in the A tier, we have Pharah, the first flyer. Mercy being a meta pick certainly helps bring Pharah into the mix more often. She has a ton of poke potential, she can play far or close range distance with equal amounts of value, and she can actually make tanks feel pressured, which is pretty rare these days. Next on our A tier, we have Tracer, and Tracer can be argued all the way up to the S tier, but I think that she just doesn't have enough damage between fight engages to justify it. She really thrives after the fight has already started, and she can isolate targets, but teams play so connected now that by the time you see an opening, the enemy Sojourn has already killed 3. Good Tracers still make her work, and I leave her at the A tier. Our next DPS in the A tier is going to be Echo. Echo is the more mobile flyer with more pick potential and bursty damage. She is much better when she gets up close and in the enemy's face. Her damage is significant, especially with damage boost, and her beam serves as a super helpful tool for finishing enemies. Even if your aim isn't fantastic, the beam is forgiving and will be there to help you secure those crucial picks. Our final A tier DPS is going to be Torbjorn. Torb has a lot of spam potential, decent burst damage, and his overload makes him formidable even to enemy snipers, since when he overloads, he cannot be one shot at max health. His ultimate is very good for separating enemy teams and securing good kills, especially in overtime fights. He is a solid character top to bottom, but still can't quite break to the S tier. Speaking of, our first S tier hero right now is going to be Widowmaker. I will absolutely get contention on this, but Widow is slipping more and more into meta as the game continues. The one-shots that she can consistently put out with little to no risk are simply too powerful to not make her a consideration for any enemy player. She also has one of the best mobility abilities in the entire game, allowing for her to escape or get surprise shots on the enemy. She's a solid S tier hero right now. Next on the S tier is going to be the very hated Junkrat. Junk crept up as a surprisingly strong pick ever since they increased the size on his grenades. His mines allow for him to have a pretty consistent one-shot combo as well, and they can double his mobility options to get him out of danger or closer to the fight. Riptire is still one of the hardest things to hit in the game and can provide lots of fight win potential. And finally in the S tier, we have, of course, Sojourn, the favorite broken hero of Blizzard, the one that has been strong since beta and still stays strong to date. She has the damage output of a spam hero with the pick potential of Widowmaker. She also has one of the best movement abilities in the game, and Blizzard has made her ultimate extremely easy to get kills with. The damage nerfs to her railgun have done very little, and she will remain as a meta pick right now and as the best DPS in the game. Moving on into the tank role, we start in the D tier, and wouldn't you guess it, it is once again the Doomfist tier. I seriously think that this tank is terrible again. He goes up and down all the time it seems, so I may change my mind in a week, but I can't remember the last time I saw any Doomfist get value. Even post HOG, he just doesn't have enough pressure or utility compared to the current top level tanks. We start things off in the C tier with good old Roadhog. What have they done to you, Hog? They got rid of his one shot, a lot of his damage, and he just is simply not the same hero he once was. He is okay sometimes, but really that is not an acceptable state for a tank to be. He just doesn't do enough, and he sits at the C tier. Next up in the C tier, we have Zarya. Her lack of mobility is very obvious right now. Without Lucio being meta, she can't really get close enough, and even when she does, she's a low HP tank that only has a couple of bubbles. This makes her more of a a liability than an asset. In the one-shot meta, you can't be an easy-to-kill tank like Zarya. Our final C-tier tank is going to be Wrecking Ball. I want to rank him higher, but I just don't see anyone getting enough value on him. Yeah, there are those rare pop-off moments that happen with some of the best ball mains in the game, and I enjoy watching them, but he just doesn't compete for me with the space making of the other dive tanks. You have to rely on your team being self-sufficient, and that doesn't make for a good time in ranked. Moving up into the B tier, we start off with D.Va. I know a lot of people don't like D.Va, but I think she just requires a lot of awareness. She has a very high damage output, whether it be against tanks or squishies. She has great mobility. Defense Matrix is one of the best mitigation sources in the entire game, and she's just a beefy tank. She requires good positioning and prediction, but you can absolutely shut games down on D.Va. Next in our B tier, we have Winston. Winston is a great dive tank, and Bubble allows for him to make a lot of space against snipers and DPS heroes that otherwise would have a field day with your team. The only issue is that the other tanks are simply better at taking ground than Monkey is. You really need an entire team to be playing with you to make Monkey work, whereas you can make a lot of comps work with the better tanks. Next up on our B tier, we have Reinhardt. Rein is a feast or famine hero right now. Either you'll be in a good situation with a team that knows how you play and can back you up, and you'll absolutely crush games on him by getting close and causing an insane amount of disruption and brawl damage, or your team is going to bait you and you'll just die. His reliance on team assistance leaves him at the B tier for me. Our final B tier tank is going to be Junker Queen. She is a solid damage outputter, pick securer, and her ultimate is still decent. She is really a jack of all trades, master of none kind of hero. She's kind of good at starting engages, kind of good at poking, kind of good at spam, kind of good at pick potential. This makes her decent but not phenomenal. B tier. Up to the A tier, we have one tank standing alone, and that would be Sigma. Sig is still a great tank that really shines on some maps with far sightlines. He can make plays and have ways of dueling the S tier tanks, but he's still just a cut below them. They just have too much power and survivability, which is absolutely crucial in the meta right now. And going up into those S tier tanks, we start off with Ramattra. Ramattra is a savage. His block allows for him to mitigate an unreal amount of damage, and when he's in his ultimate, this becomes extremely clear. If he receives any kind of healing, his ultimate will just last forever as you endlessly shoot into the back of his fists. His utility is off of the charts, and he of course does a ton of damage as well. He is an easy S tier pick. Our final S tier hero, and my choice for probably the best tank, just barely beating out Ramattra, is Orisa. Her CC with her javelin is fantastic. It's got a long range, and it's pretty easy to land. It does good damage and can secure Orisa some solid picks or stop enemy playmakers. Her Fortify and Javelin Spin rotation allows for her to sustain through an unreal amount of damage, much like Ramattra's block, and her ultimate is lethal when comboed with even just some basic abilities or damage. She is a very easy choice for S tier. If you enjoyed, be sure to like and subscribe for more educational guides and news content coming down the road. I hope you all have a great day. Take care and peace. There is no better way to improve your game than by checking out GameLeap.com. We have hundreds of guides all finely crafted from some of the best coaches in the game, with multiple new ones coming every single week that are designed to help you lock in and start climbing. Just follow the link in the description below or go to GameLeap.com to get your subscription today.